Hi folks, my name is Mike Dobbs. I'm your host for another episode of Government Matters right here on Focus Springfield. And with us today is State Auditor Diana, I'm going to screw it up, DiZoglio. Did I come close?
That sounds great. That sounds great. You know what? Our family actually pronounces our name the wrong way. All of my Italian nanas across the state remind me that the correct way to say it is DiZoglio. But because I was born and raised in Massachusetts, in the wonderful town of Methuen, up on the New Hampshire border, we were actually raised saying DiZoglio. So you said it exactly the way our family says it.
Well, a gold star on the calendar for me. Usually the role of state auditor is a very important function, but not necessarily one that causes a lot of headlines. And you have the distinction of being someone who is in the headlines these days, discussing an issue that is very important. And that is, of course, the implementation of the idea that you would have the ability, you and your office, to perform audits on the House and the Senate and the General Court. So I want you to just describe this as if I was a kindergartner, because I think it's an issue that it's controversial because there are people who are saying that this is not something that you can actually implement within the confines of your office. And I think that probably people are a little bit confused about this to begin with. So let's start there. What should people know about what you're trying to do with this? And then we'll get into the topic of where it stands right now from a legal point of view.
That sounds great. Thanks for the opportunity. So first and foremost, I think it's important to start off with saying that I am the state auditor, but my job is not to audit every day people of Massachusetts. I'm not the IRS. I'm not the Department of Revenue. I do not audit people's tax returns or anything like that. I audit state government for you, the taxpayer, and I make sure that state government agencies and departments are operating efficiently and effectively, and we work to get rid of waste and fraud in different programs to make sure that services are going to those truly in need. So a lot of folks come to me and they'll say, oh, the state auditor. I have to remind them, we audit state government for you. We audit agencies like the MBTA, the Department of Children and Families. We did a report recently on the pilot program here in Massachusetts, which has a significant impact on Western Mass. With your reimbursements that you get for payments in lieu of taxes in Western Mass, you're not getting your fair share. We did a very robust report that can be found on my website, mass.gov/auditor, in which we talk about how Western Mass is not seeing its fair share and ways to make sure that it is. So we look at these different programs and different agencies in government, and then we're able to report on what we find and give a set of recommendations to agencies on how they can improve services, better spend taxpayer resources, and if we do identify anything unlawful or any violations of state records, we also let these state agencies and departments know about that so that they can work to improve upon what they're doing and fix what the problematic area was that we identified. We are there to help, not to hurt. It's our office's mission to make government work better. Make government work better. That's why folks are so concerned with the fact that the Speaker and Senate President and the Massachusetts State Legislature don't want our office to conduct an audit of their financial receipts and state contracts right now. This is something that we actually do of many, many state entities and departments. We look at their contracts, we look at the way those contracts were executed, and we'll make sure that they were executed correctly. We did this with the Office of Housing and Livable Communities recently, where we looked at contracts that were given out to private vendors, the food contracts, the transportation contracts, and we cited this administration for failures on the way that those contracts were executed and asked the administration to resolve those challenges and to make sure that the law and regulations were followed in their next round of contracts. Similarly, we look at things in various state agencies, such as settlement agreements, right? We've done multiple reports now on the use of settlement agreements that are taxpayer funded, that go out between state agencies and their employees, that can include what's called non-disclosure agreements, which mean that state agencies are able to essentially purchase the silence of public employees about potential harassment, discrimination, or abuse occurring in the workplace. And we shined a light in recent reports on how those agreements are being used, how much taxpayer dollars have gone towards funding these types of agreements, and how often silencing language was being used with respect to the use of these taxpayer-funded settlement agreements. We're simply trying to look at those same types of things in our state legislature right now, based on the reality that 72% of the voting population in this great state went out to the ballot last November and said that they want the Office of State Auditor to conduct an independent audit of the state legislature. It's worth saying that the legislature says that they already conduct audits of themselves and that they believe that this is unnecessary. Let's clear up some of the misinformation that's been being put out there by the Speaker and Senate President about what they believe an audit is. What they believe an audit is a review of financial records by a vendor that they get to control, and the records that are released, they get to actually dictate what's released to the general public and what's not released to the general public, what's reviewed by the private vendor that they choose and what's not reviewed by that private vendor. So they essentially get to control the entire scope of an audit by a private vendor that they're working with. And then because they're not subject to the public records law, they can actually withhold any of the findings of that audit and just put a very high level review out there that says, oh, we spent money and, you know, here's the amount that we spent, and give a couple of high line numbers. But there are no documented receipts attached. There are no state contracts attached. You can't look at the communications about how those state contracts were entered into. You can't view any receipts. And the issue is that they're not even itemizing some of these things, right? Most of these things. And when you ask for the receipts, they tell you that they're not subject to the public records law, so they don't have to give you the receipts. Every city and town in this Commonwealth is subject to the state's public record law, and the city of Springfield, your city government here, is subject to the state's public records law. Your mayor, your councilors, your school committee members, they have to follow the public records law and release the receipts, release the state contracts, let them be available for public inspection when anyone wants to see them. Our state legislature refuses to do so because they exempt themselves. So a lot of people viewed this audit when they went to go vote for it. It wasn't even that they were super concerned about an audit in and of itself. It was actually viewed by most people as just being one way to be able to get access into the inner workings of the legislature, because most folks know that we are frequently ranked by most good government groups as being the least transparent state government in the entire nation. That's the case because our governor's office, our legislature, and our judiciary all claim exemptions from the state's public records laws. And we're actually the only state in the entire nation that allows for these three branches of government to have these exemptions. No other state in the entire nation allows for their legislature, governor's office, and their courts to all just exempt themselves from basic accountability to the taxpayer, and to say to the taxpayer that they're not even going to show their financial receipts for the expenditure of millions of taxpayer dollars. So this audit is something that folks wanted to shine a light on some of those records, to put out the spending, and to break into the inner workings of those, administrative and business records, so to speak. But they're breaking the law. They're breaking the law, and unfortunately, the Speaker and Senate President are really the only ones who control this conversation. They're the only ones with decision-making authority. It's their call. And what they've essentially said is they believe that they're above the law and that they don't like me. They have personally attacked me and said that because they believe that I can't be trusted or there's something wrong with me, that they should get to break the law because of their personal grievances with me as a human being. I have reminded them that it's not just this one woman from Methuen who they need to be worried about, but they need to be concerned about the fact that 72% of the voters across the state, including every single city and town, voted in favor of this proposal to make sure that my office is mandated by law to audit the state legislature. And we're just trying to do our job right now, but we're being blocked. So what we're doing is we're filing in court, and we just filed in the SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court, to make sure that the law gets enforced. And we are fighting like hell to make sure that the people have their day in court. And we are asking the justice to please side with the people of Massachusetts.
So let me back up a little bit. Now, you served in the General Court, the legislature. When you were serving, did you have concerns about the procedures that you just outlined? And I was just wondering if this was something, if your interest in doing this is something that came from your service in the legislature.
It did, in fact. During my time in the legislature, I was very well known for bucking the party leaders, so to speak. And I remember being told all the time that the Speaker and Senate President had made their decision and that I needed to stop bucking the leaders and do as they told me. And, I took issue with that. Respectfully, my district, my communities that I represented at the time, and still do as their state auditor now, would come to me with issues that they had identified in legislation that we were working on or funding priorities that differed from the Senate presidents and the speakers. But I was always told just to take my marching orders, and that is what your senators and reps are being told. Now, whether or not they want to admit to that is a different thing, right? Because they're trying to navigate not getting retaliated against in real time while they're trying to serve in the legislature right now, and they're trying to bring home resources to Springfield and to other areas in Western Mass. The Speaker and Senate President are very well known for retaliating against the members who stand up to them. And when I was in the legislature, it was no different. I was one of the many who had been retaliated against in there, and I often stood up with respect to the Speaker or the Senate President trying to force through a roll call too quickly without having given us time to even read a bill that we were voting on, telling us to, just look the other way when they were trying to ram through a bill that was bad for our communities, and asking us to just be silent. They have the impression, the Speaker and Senate President, that legislators are there to regurgitate what they give them for talking points. And I would often say, when I was a senator and a state representative, I'm here to legislate, not to regurgitate. And I am a representative of the people to state government, not a representative of state government to the people. And it's unfortunate that the Senate President and Speaker have lost sight of that, and that absolute power has corrupted absolutely. What we have is just a handful of very, very powerful politicians on Beacon Hill who have been there for far too long. And they've just wielded so much power that they're essentially bullying local legislators, your local senators, your reps, and basically saying that, if they don't go along to get along, that they're going to punish the communities that they represent, that they're going to take away their stipends, that they're going to punish the community centers that they're trying to get funding for, or the local school districts. So really, your local reps and senators are in kind of a hostage situation when it comes to being able to represent their communities up on Beacon Hill, because Beacon Hill is broken. Beacon Hill is broken, and it is long overdue that reforms are made to how the system is governed up there. We are supposed to have a government for and by the people. But when you see that most of the votes up on Beacon Hill are 100% in lockstep with whatever the Senate President and Speaker want and what they say to do, that's problematic, right? So a lot of people have concerns with this, and I had concerns with this when I was in there, and I would often take to the House floor and the Senate floor when I was a rep, when I was a senator, and I would make hay about it. And they would certainly show me, the door every time that happened. They would retaliate against funding, they would try to block my bills, and they did strip me of the important chairmanships that I had previously had when I bucked the system. They removed the Small Business and Community Development chairmanship from me, and that was a very important committee to me. I was working with our local chambers of commerce, and I was working on different bills to help our small business community. And unfortunately, Madam President was upset with me one time when I took to the Senate floor and I pushed back against something, and she didn't like it, and she took that committee away from me and gave me a committee that had no bills going through it as punishment. So, that's the way it works up there. And I often fought for transparency and accountability and said we should be able to have access to the government we pay for. And taxpayers deserve access to these budget negotiations. They deserve access to what's happening up here. But that was not a welcome thing when I was in the Senate, and it certainly is not a welcome conversation now as I'm state auditor. But yes, I did run to be the state auditor so I could take that work in the legislature and bring it to the next level with a greater platform and a stronger voice to be able to tackle these challenges. I worked on that state budget for 10 years as a legislator, and in doing so, really developed the experience in understanding how these different state agencies operate and the funding priorities and the budgetary concerns and the policy concerns. And I have incorporated that into the work of the state auditor's office. And I'll tell you, this audit of the state legislature, this is something that people across the Commonwealth want because they're losing faith in their state government. And people just want to know that things aren't being hidden from them. And it is incumbent upon all of us as elected leaders to make sure that we're not giving them cause for concern and that we are staying away from even the perception that there is something to hide. Because people are suspicious right now, right? And rightly so.
It's a very cynical political environment.
Absolutely.
Especially in terms of the federal environment right now, which does, of course, come down to the state level. So I was reading a bunch of stuff about this, and I just need it explained to me because, I'm a feeble old man at this point. So you went to the state Supreme Court and basically said, I would like to have a special assistant attorney general to handle the arguments about this law. And you were told by one of the justices, nope, we're not going to do that. I got that correct? Okay. So at this point, in order for you to fully implement this law that the people wanted, you have to have it. Is it a constitutional issue that has to be affirmed by the court so that it then can be implemented? Have I got that correct? And if not, please correct me.
So the issue is that we are seeking to have our constitutional right to due process recognized right now. What's happened is the Attorney General, though you will hear her claim all over television and she'll look direct to camera and tell the voters that she supports this audit, she does not support this audit. She has refused to meet with me. She's refused to discuss this publicly with me. I have asked her to represent us on this. She refused to do that. And then she refused to actually even just stay out of this and let the Speaker and Senate President get their attorney and let me get our attorney and let us just duke it out in court, so to speak, right? She actually has chosen to represent the Speaker and Senate President in court. She's not trying to work with me at all. She's actually legally opposing me, and she filed a motion in court on behalf of the Senate President and Speaker asking the judge to dismiss my case for Mr. Speaker and Madam President. So she's chosen a side. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, has chosen to represent the Speaker and Senate President against the 72% of the people of this Commonwealth who voted for an audit. I just need to be clear about that because there's been a lot of misinformation. When the Attorney General says she supports the audit, she does not support the audit. She wouldn't be in court asking the judge to dismiss my lawsuit to sue for the audit to get conducted if she supported us. I think she wants to have it both ways, right? She's blocking us in court. We are asking the judge to recognize that because she has decided to represent the Speaker and Senate President against we the people and against the Office of State Auditor, that we are entitled to what is called conflict counsel. Conflict counsel. And what that means is the Attorney General has conflicted herself out of being able to represent our office, and she's also conflicted herself out of being able to be the one who decides whether or not I get to have an attorney, right? Normally, the Attorney General does get to approve or not approve whether or not agencies like ours are entitled to counsel, right? Because she's the Attorney General of the Commonwealth. What happened, though, recently is the Attorney General chose a side. And the second she chose that side was the second that our office became entitled to conflict counsel, because she has conflicted herself out. And we are asking the judge to recognize our right to have an attorney. What do they say when you hear, folks arresting people, right? They go, you have a right to remain silent and you have the right to?
An attorney.
An attorney, right? So we do have a right to an attorney and a right to representation under the Constitution and a right to due process. And what this judge just did, Justice Wenlet, is she decided that justice is for some and not for all. That it's just for those with power and privilege and not for others who are seeking representation. And I'm calling that out for what it is, because it was the most disappointing decision I've ever seen. And I think that it's actually something that we need to be really concerned about in our Supreme Judicial Court right now. And we need to put people on notice that these judges are appointed by Beacon Hill. They're appointed by Beacon Hill. Their salaries are funded by Beacon Hill. So when we, the people, want to take on Beacon Hill, it can be very challenging to get some judges to feel empowered to support the people over the politicians, right? That's the reality, unfortunately. And I hate having to say it that way. Folks have told me, well, don't say this about the judges because, they're very powerful. Well, respectfully, if I as a constitutional officer can't get my right to an impartial hearing recognized by a Supreme Judicial Court justice right now in this Commonwealth, what does that say about low-income folks in our communities? What does that say about people who are disenfranchised and vulnerable populations of people in our communities who don't know how to navigate the justice system and aren't well connected and don't have powerful people on their side? It says the justice system is broken to them, is what it says. And people already don't trust the courts right now. So I am going everywhere to talk about this because I do want the judges to be put on notice that while I do believe that there are some very good judges who have a great moral and ethical code, that there are some judges who unfortunately seem to be not putting the people above the politicians. The will of the people reigns supreme in Massachusetts and under our Constitution, not the will of the politicians. And when you go to court and you say that you're going to block access for 72% of the people who voted for this initiative to be able to have their day in court to make their case, what does that say to people? It says that access to justice is for some and not for all. And if you're not politically connected and privileged, that you don't belong in court and you don't have a right to be there. And that's unacceptable. So I'm pushing back on that justice, and I'm pushing back on the Attorney General. And we just filed yesterday in court a motion to have our own Special Assistant Attorney General represent our office and the will of the people to get this audit done, to be able to have representation since the Attorney General's chosen the Speaker and Senate President. We need to be able to have legal representation in court. And we have filed and pushed back on that yesterday. And I'd like to say this too. Some folks have said, well, people say this is a waste of taxpayer dollars. So folks at home know the attorney, Shannon Liss Reardon, who has agreed to take this case. She's a very well-known, fantastic attorney, most well-known for being a labor attorney. She was a Democratic candidate, actually, for Attorney General. And she didn't make it, but she still very much cares about these issues and she wants to be helpful. So she actually offered to represent our office and the 72% of people out there who want this audit to get done pro bono. She's not going to charge the taxpayers a dime for this in my office. So we are very grateful for those services, and we are asking that the judge recognize that we have somebody willing to do this work for free, and the people deserve an answer. The people deserve an answer. They voted for this. They want the law to get enforced. What are they hiding? The Supreme Judicial Court has a responsibility to the taxpayers of this Commonwealth to make a decision, and to make a decision in the public's interest, not in the Attorney General's interest, the Speaker's interest, the Senate President's interest, or even my interest. but in the public's interest. And what is in the public interest? The public interest is to make sure that the 72% of people that went out to go vote for this, that the will of the voters is respected. They said to do it. This isn't Diana DiZoglio saying to do this. This is millions of people saying, we want an audit to get conducted. And to deny those people access to court, that's disgraceful.
Is this then a constitutional issue? Because, I mean, I see the quote from the justice. The state auditor cites no statute, constitutional provision, or other authority that would permit a single justice of the Supreme Judicial Court to appoint a special assistant attorney general. So is this actually, because I've had people tell me that what is proposed with this law and the manner it was written is that it's not constitutional. So is this a test of the Massachusetts state constitution? Is that what your lawsuit ultimately will be?
My lawsuit actually is just to get access to financial receipts and state contracts. So we're actually just suing for our right under state law to get access to those contracts. The Supreme Judicial Court might choose to rule on the constitutionality when it comes before them, and I would welcome that conversation. I've been asking to have that conversation. Here's the issue. The Supreme Judicial Court single justice, who's responsible for ruling on whether I have a right to an attorney or not, is trying to keep that conversation out of court, and I want to know why. And I think the people of this Commonwealth want to know why. Why don't they want to have this go before the courts? Why wouldn't they just have this go before the courts? This is not a constitutional issue, friends. This is not. Let me tell you something. The legislature audits the executive branch. They have a post-audit and oversight committee. Literally, it's called post-audit and oversight. And do you know what they're doing right now? They are conducting audit and oversight hearings of the executive branch's Department of Transportation's state contracts right now. Imagine that. So the legislature believes that they can audit and provide oversight to the governor's Department of Transportation state contracts, and that they can subpoena those records, but they say that they can't allow anybody from executive branch agencies to review their state contracts. That is what's called checks and balances. That is what's constitutional. They have a check on us. We have a check on them. That's the system of checks and balances. We show our state contracts. They put their state contracts out there. We release our receipts. They release their receipts.
Right.
And there's a system of checks and balances that goes around to make sure that none of us gets too powerful, right? None of us should have all the power. That's actually what separation of powers is. And what they've done is they have really misinterpreted the separation of powers clause purposefully. Separation of powers is in place to make sure that the legislature doesn't get too powerful and have all the power. And what the Constitution does is it separated the power.
Right.
So the executive branch gets executive authority. The legislature gets to vote on the budget and file bills and file amendments, right? They have that authority. The courts get the power of the bench. That's a separate authority. That's the power of the courts. And our office, as a constitutional office, we only have the power to audit. We can't vote on laws. We can't do the budget. We only have the power to review and report on what's going on and make that transparent to the voters of the Commonwealth. And that's all we're seeking to do, is give voters access to what's happening with the taxpayer-funded records that exist up at the State House and break into the closed doors up there.
Well, I know I got to get you out of here because you have other things that you have to go and do here in Western Massachusetts. I'd like to have you back at some point because I think that this is a very important issue, and it certainly needs to be covered and explained to voters what the next steps are.
People have asked me, well, what can we do, Auditor? What can we do? They're gaslighting the general public. They're lying about what they're doing. They're claiming one thing but doing another. They're fighting us in court right now. The reality is the courts could rule against us. They could. And that will be very sad for the people of Massachusetts. But the reality is the SJC will have the decision on that. All we can do is hope for the best and hope our judges do the right thing. In case they don't, I'm asking people to go to the polls this November and vote for an act to increase access to public records. And what this does is this actually puts the state legislature and the governor's office under the public records law. It will make sure that all of the documents that I've been trying to get as your state auditor, but that have been being denied to my office, that those records would actually just be made directly available to you, the taxpayers of Massachusetts, so that you can call up, and if you have a question about a receipt that you want to see or a document that you want to examine, every single resident of this Commonwealth will be able to get access directly to those itemized receipts, those state contracts, and those administrative and business records. And this, to me, is the way forward. Because like I said, every city and town in this Commonwealth, including city government in Springfield and across the state, my office follows the public records laws. The legislature doesn't, and they need to, right? This is just a matter of transparency. We shouldn't be the only state in the entire nation where we allow for the legislature, governor's office, and judiciary not to put their financial receipts out there. I mean, come on. So I'm asking people, please go to vote for this ballot question. You're going to see it on your November ballot. Remember, an act to increase access to public records and subject the governor's office and the legislature to the public records laws so that you, the taxpaying residents of the Commonwealth, can get access to the government you pay for. And you don't even need to go through my office to do it. How about that?
Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We can come you back. We can have some more discussions about that.
Thank you so much.
And thanks, folks, for watching another episode of Government Matters here on Focus Springfield.